But I'm going to warn you in advance. We're talking about money today. We are going to talk about Jesus because Jesus has a lot to say about money, but I've said this before in the last few weeks. If you're new with us and you're going, great, my first time in this church and they're already talking about money, well, just be patient. We're going to be okay. There's going to be more to it than you think. And as we get into those spaces, really what we're trying to do and what we've tried to do over the last several weeks is get our mind in line with what Jesus thinks and says about money so that we can line up. You know, typically, in my mind, any given moment, I've got a song playing somewhere up here. And sometimes that song is a worship song, and you just got it kind of playing, and it's encouraging. Sometimes that song is a more aggressive song, like when you have a chainsaw in your hand or something. You should probably have a more calm song in your mind at that point. But this week I was getting ready for bed, and a song is just stuck in my head. And I come out, and Corey was going to wait up a little bit longer for Emma, and I come out and I said, normally I got a worship song stuck in my head. And Corey goes, wait. I'm like, what? And then I blurted, I said, but tonight and she's trying to pause me. I said, it's Barbie Girl. That's stuck in my head. For those of you who don't know, it's something like, I'm a Barbie girl living in a Barbie world. And without communicating anything, she goes, me too. Same song. I don't know what we heard, what spun Barbie world to be stuck in both of our minds, what framework of the nexus of reality we found ourselves in that day. But we had a like mind. We were of one accord. Do you know how many marriages want to be on the same page with each other? And there we were on the same page over Barbie Girl. And that's like how we want to be with our whole lives with Jesus. Corey, is that a true story for the people? It's a true story. I'm not making, you can't, this one you can't make up because I don't even know that I've ever heard the whole song. I don't know. Do you know? Who? Why do you know? 90s music, there you go. So anyway, Chad too is a Barbie girl living in a Barbie world. This is very good. Is it on the playlist? Or you just know music? Just know music. There you go. He's got a daughter. I mean, right? We got daughters. So. But you want to be on the same page when Jesus starts talking about stuff. You want to be on the same page with him with your life, because if Jesus is the king of the universe, and he's the one who says this is where abundant life is found, this is what the best life you can live looks like, I want to be on the same page with him because I want that best life. And there's so much about that we often struggle to find the best life. I was talking with one of our youth that came back from Blitz this past weekend, and she says, Pastor, I really just want to go deeper with Jesus. And I think that's a fantastic desire. And so I asked her, I said, what does deeper mean to you? And as she began to talk about it, she says, I want to know more. I want to know about God more. I want to know more of the Bible. I want to know. And I said, oh, what you really mean is you want to be wider with God, not deeper. And I said, because if you wanted to be deeper, we may ask a different question. And a lot of times, especially like when it comes to something like money or identity or purpose, relationships, and you can start to unpack that across the world. We start talking about, I want to be deeper with God, but really what we mean is we want to be wider, and you can be really wide with God and never orient your life under him. I said, see, if you really wanted to ask the question, so many of us start with the t-shirt, the bumper sticker, or the bracelet, WWJD, what would Jesus do? But the real question that we we should ask, and I said, let me just kind of give you a picture of this. I said, if I ask the question, how do I love Corey better? How do I be a better husband? Or how do I be a better father? I could find a checklist of things to go and do and just accomplish the things on the list and never really be a better husband or father. I'm just doing better stuff. And I said, so the question that I want to ask really gets down to a much longer acronym, and I won't confuse you with it, but the real question I want to ask is, how did Jesus orient his life in order to be the kind of person Jesus was so that he did the kinds of things that he did? And she looked real confused, which I see that same look in the room right now. And I said, because here's what would happen. The question I would want to ask is, God, how do I put my life under you as a person so that I can understand the way that you love Corey, so that I can be the kind of husband that she needs me to be, so that when she needs it, I can do the kinds of things she needs me to do. I said, when we get into a crisis, we start to pray. The first thing that we pray in the crisis is God, get me out of the trouble. When if I wanted to go deeper with God, the question I would say to him, or the prayer request I would make is God, I'm going through this difficult thing. How do I orient my life under you in this difficult thing so that I can be the kind of person you want me to be that can navigate this crisis however it goes? And it really gets down to how am I orienting my heart with God? And money is one of those things that so clearly talks about the orientation of our hearts. And that's why it's so important for us to walk through, especially in a place where we're talking about housing markets bursting, the everything market. The one thing I heard someone in Forbes this week say, the one thing that is keeping America from falling apart economically right now is the resiliency of her people. It wasn't policies. It wasn't promises. It was the shoulder of Americans of all backgrounds and nationalities, colors, genders, bringing all of this together to go, we are going to fight through this. It wasn't politicians. It wasn't Capitol Hill. It was the everyday people living in everyday zip codes. And imagine if everyday people living in everyday zip codes began to orient their lives under Jesus in a way that we could navigate every kind of crisis, not just a financial crisis, what the world may look like. And money is one of these places that continues to speak about the orientation of our hearts. Jesus tells us where our treasure is, our heart is also. So how do we begin to orient under him when it comes to money? We kind of recap some things here to kind of get us to a conclusion today. Money is a tool, not a treasure. According to Jesus, money is a tool, not a treasure. It can add meaning to our lives, but it's not the meaning of life, right? Money is a means, not an end. When money becomes the end, then life really has no meaning. And we're going to get more into that particular text today about a guy who has a whole lot of stuff. And what's he going to do with it? Money is a means, it's not an end. Money is easy to track, but it's hard to catch. If you watch it, if you track it, you know where it is, but once you get behind with it, it's hard to catch up to it. One of my daughters is wrestling with med school right now. Do I apply? Do I go to med school? What do I do with this? And the statement she made this week is the only choice I have is to go into insurmountable debt to go where I think I'm supposed to go. How many people feel that way about so many other decisions? The only place I can go is into insurmountable debt to get my life in the place where I want it to be. And because of that debt, your life can never be where you want it to be. Money is easy to track but hard to catch. We have to live beyond the consumption assumption, right? The assumption that everything I have is for my consuming. The Bible has a word for that. It's called greed. And when we live into that, we live into sin, not the abundant life. We may have an abundance of things, but those things aren't causing us to live abundantly, fulfilled. We live in the world of newer, fresher, more, even though all of our stuff works just fine. So we start to challenge to live beyond that. And then we said, we have to flip the script on me first living with leftover giving, that the generous life is lived by choosing what to give first and then ordering everything else under that. And we'll talk more about giving today and how that impacts legacy and what that means for your story moving forward. But we brought all these ideas together to go, if money talked, what would money tell us? And in that space of what money would say to us, I've invited you to kind of come up with a voice for your money. And how does it sound? And I gave the example the very first week that we have this dog named Odie. Odie died in 2020. But even in memory, Odie kind of sounds like this. And every time we tell an Odie story, he's always got this kind of voice. And I don't even know if he was this dumb, I don't know anything about, he never could fetch, never shook hands. He was just a real cuddler. So he probably really just sounded like this. Can we just cuddle, guys? I don't know. But for us, he really sounds like this. And your money may have a voice, and it may sound like the disappointed parent who's always telling you you can do better with life. I don't know how many times you look at George or Abe or Ben, and they're wagging their finger at you. For some reason, if you're like me, whenever I have a bigger bill, it's got a stop sign on it. Don't touch me. But the little bills are like, hey, let's party. Let's go. If I had 100 ones and a $100 bill, if I had the $100 bill, I would have it for weeks, but the 100 ones would be gone by tomorrow. I don't understand why that works that way, but the bigger bills are like, stop. And the little bills are like, whoa, let's go. And then they're gone. We came back from vacation one time. We took this road trip. We went through 17 states over the course of 21 days. We traveled just around 14,000 miles. We got to San Francisco on July 4th. We went out to the pier. We're watching everything. It was the beginning of Shark Week, so all the people are out there giving us all kinds of shark stuff. I don't know, Shark Week. And I had a $50 bill left in my pocket after we left San Francisco. And Corey goes, what's that? I went, it's my souvenir. All the kids got their things, keychains, magnets, T-shirts, all across the country. That we had a great trip. And she says, you didn't get you anything. I'm like, I know. Souvenir. And then one day we ended up at a cash-only parking garage. And all I had, 2 years later, all I had left was a souvenir. I'm like, Corey, you got any cash? She's like, no. So I pull out my wallet. And you got a wallet, Darwin? You got a secret compartment in your wallet? Yeah. Most guys know what I'm talking about. So I had to reach back into the secret compartment where, you slip it out. Here you go. And the next thing I know, my souvenir was gone. Maybe money is like a finance professor. I don't know what voice you give it. But if money talked, what would it say? And I've said, the precept of this, if money talked, I think it would actually echo a lot of what Jesus actually said when he did talk about money. And so we kind of came up with these. I can add meaning to life, but I'm not the meaning of life. That was week 1. We said with money that the moment you think you own me, I actually own you. God actually establishes us to be managers, not owners. And again, we're going to see another manager in the Bible today, and what does his life look like? But God owns everything. And he invites us to take care of it and to steward it, and how we do that. But the moment we think we own something, it begins to own us. So how do we live as managers? My direction reveals your affection. That was last week. If you're new with us, kind of catching you up, or maybe you went to the lake last week, I don't know. My direction reveals your affection. Remember, where your treasure is, your heart is. And you can see where your heart falls by what you're giving your money to. Money speaks so much about where our heart actually lies with God and others. So if money could talk, I think it has one more message for us today. And I think it would sum itself up like this: I'm a better servant than a master. Money will serve all kinds of purposes. And here's the funny thing about money, right? Like we kind of joke about like money always kind of having its own way and doing its own thing. But here's the trick about it. Money only goes where you send it. Different from your teenager, it doesn't have a mind of its own. Money only goes where you send it. And that's the challenge, is for us to send it, not spend it. I used to have this phrase when I talked about my day, and if you don't know this about me, I am a very task-oriented person. I just happen to love people also. But my primary motivation in life is getting it done. I love to see things accomplished. I love to win at life, whatever that means. I like to be able to walk away from the day feeling like some good came out of it. When I put my head on the pillow at night, I can walk through my day and go, I accomplished something, I accomplished something, I accomplished something. And I used to come home early in life, and I would talk to Corey. She'd be like, how did your day go? I'm like, I got nothing done. She's like, why? I'm like, I had so many people come into the office today. Like every time I turned around, there was someone else coming in the office. I never had a moment to get any task done. And she's like, hello, pastor. You live in the world of people. By living into people's lives, you're doing something. And hopefully you're doing some good in people's lives. Do you make them feel like you just said to me? No. I hope not. And she challenged that perspective of what I do with my time. And I began to switch my language so that I no longer spend time with people. I invest time with people. Because spending can be so wasteful. So that when we meet, and if you've ever met with me, I hope you genuinely feel this way. When we sit down together, whether we're talking church stuff or family stuff or personal stuff, I hope you feel like I give you 100% of who I am in that space. Because I want to invest in people. That's who God called me to be. And to send my time into your life rather than to spend it and feel like we just wasted everything. Money's the same way. Everything that we manage, we send it. We send our talent, we send our time, we send our treasure. And money is a far better servant than it is a master. It goes where you send it. But how do we get into this sending mentality? What does that look like? Like there's this guy in Luke chapter 12, and we're going to read about him. He is not a sender, and he's not a spender. He is kind of a stingy fellow, and the way Jesus refers to him is as the rich fool. So in Luke chapter 12, hear the word of the Lord today. Someone from the crowd said to him, so let's kind of back up for just a second. When you start to see these things, people ask Jesus questions, and they start to give you a context. Who is this crowd? Where is Jesus? Back up to chapter 12, verse 1. Meanwhile, a crowd of many thousands came together so that they were trampling one another. And his disciples were saying, be on your guard. Be on your guard against the Pharisees and their hypocrisy, that they won't be uncovered. And so this crowd is together. He's starting to warn people. They're starting to watch for him. There's so many people, they're trampling each other. It's like a crazy, do we have a festival like that in Minnesota? Like Coachella or Stagecoach or something like that? Everybody trying to get up north on a Friday afternoon in the summer? You ever been on 35 at that moment? It's like your sample of Southern California traffic. I lived through it for almost a decade. Like even rush hour here I love, but on a good summer's day, you try to get up 35 to get to Duluth, you're toast. You're just going to sit for a minute. Take the whole day off. You'll be better. Leave Thursday. Everybody's leaving Friday. So this whole crowd, this giant group of people has come together, and one person yells out from the crowd, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Do you have tattletales in your family? Like the whole crowd is recognizing Jesus' authority, and so if Jesus says to do something, then of course everybody's going to do it. I found out a secret conversation in our home the other day that Corey had with Mary Jane. Mary says, "Christina, you know you're supposed to do what Dad says." "Well, you can do what Mom says too." And she's like, "No, Mom said to do what you say because she gets over it easier." Thanks, Mary. So now I got full authority because apparently I don't get over it as easy as Corey does. And so they're bringing something to Jesus because Jesus has full authority, they think. And they're going, if I tell Jesus this and he tells my brother to do that, now he can't do anything else. He's got to do what Jesus says. So he yells it out of the crowd. He's going to take advantage of the moment. And Jesus' friend, "Who appointed me the judge or the arbitrator over you?" And he told him, "Watch out and be on guard against all greed, because one's life is not the abundance of his possession." Now notice, Jesus isn't saying he's not the arbiter or the judge. Do you catch that? He says, "Who appointed me to be?" And if the person answers rightly, he would answer, "The Father has appointed the Son to be the judge of all things." But if he misses it, now we're in trouble. So Jesus doesn't deny being the judge or the arbiter of his life. He's challenging, "Who appointed me to be this?" So be on guard against all greed, because one's life does not consist of the abundance of possession. And then he tells a story. A rich man's land was very productive. And that man thought to himself, "What should I do since I don't have anywhere to store my crops? I will do this," he thought. "I'll tear down my old barns and build bigger ones and store all my goods and grain there. And then I will say to myself, you have many goods stored up for many years. Take it easy, eat, drink, and enjoy yourself." Sounds like a plan. Store up your money. It multiplies over time. We've got to love compound interest. And then you get old. And then what? What happens? How do you deal with that in life? God appears to him in the story, and he says, "You fool, this very night your life is demanded of you, and the things that you have prepared, whose will they be?" That's how it is with the one who stores up treasures for himself and is not rich toward God. This guy stored up everything. He had it all. And do you know, let's just say that that's a Monday. And on Monday night, God says to him, "What happens to your stuff on Tuesday?" Someone else will decide what's going to happen because you're dead. Nothing is yours. So we wrestle through this dynamic of what does it What does it look like? Who gets it? According to Jesus, and again, like when you talk about money and Jesus' reality of stuff, it doesn't always start sounding like good news at first. No one likes to talk about dying, but you will expire before your stuff does. And then what happens with your stuff that's left over? Anna Grace and Zach are getting married in just a few short weeks, and you know, some of the conversation is you start to look for stuff. They're closing on a house this week, and we're all excited about that. But when you never have owned a home before, how do you furnish a home? How do you put stuff in it? So you look at estate sales, and you're looking to, you know, kind of to be frugal with stuff, and you're looking now all of a sudden at somebody else's grandma's favorite stuff. That will just be your temporary stuff until the stuff that you can want or afford becomes your stuff. When Corey and I first married, our very first dining room table was a 4-leg car table we picked up on the side of the road. We had 4 metal chairs that we could fold down and eat around. Eventually, we got a hand-me-down table from her mom. The one thing that we bought new when we married is we bought a bed together. I lived in a dorm for most of our relationship. And having slept on that dorm bed, I didn't care if I took it with me or not. It was some of the worst sleep over 4.5 years, right? We're getting a real bed. This is great. But you'll expire before your stuff does. This guy just built bigger barns and filled them up, and the next thing he knows, he's dead. And then what happens? But there's something else to be said, right? Like your stuff will still fade. Jesus says this in a different parable. We want to kind of bring in like how Jesus says it. In a sermon that he's teaching, he says, you need to store up treasures for yourself in heaven where rust can't ruin and moth can't eat and thieves cannot steal. Even the stuff you saved is going to fade away. It's not going to last. And so now we've got a conundrum. Like we spent our whole lives trying to build up something, and even that something still is going to one day fade. Are you starting to see like the dynamic that money isn't everything? But my response to it can be a lot more if I align my life with who Jesus is and what he does with it. According to Jesus, somebody else will determine what happens with your stuff when you die. Now, this is not a promotion for you to go to LegalZoom today and go get your will straight. Some of you may need to do that, though. But here's a question. If your money goes where you tell it to go, and you have the legal permission to tell your money to go do something in this world after you're gone, are you willing to leave that up to your convictions or to your inheritors' convictions? That's a real question. Like some of you in this room lament the dynamics of your kids or your grandkids not sharing the faith that you share. I am not telling you not to leave legacy for them. But I am telling you to consider what you do now with what will be done later. Your money still serves you while you have a voice. But if it doesn't serve you while you have a voice, it will serve somebody else. Money is a much better servant than it is a master. And somebody will get to tell it where to go. So what will you do with it? How will you build into this dynamic of legacy leaving that could be eternity shaping? That's the real question. What do you do with it? And if you have a question about later, what about right now? What do you do with it? Some of us in this room are thinking about twilight far more than others, but none of us can determine the day nor the hour. of our own lives. So how do we live it well? And how do we leave it well? And that's the challenge that we all face. We start thinking about the big pictures of things, and we can do so much more if we're just more intentional. No longer am I talking about spending it or saving it. I'm talking about investing it and sending it. And the question we have to ask goes back to the very first message of this series. To what ends do you want your life to be a means? To what end do you want your life to be a means? Only you can answer that question. Is life going to be all about you and end with you, or will your life be about something else? And to what ends will you go to see that something else come alive? That's a very real question. How does that unfold? And so we have to deal with that. This is the question of the rich fool in Luke's parable. And for him, it was all about him. I just need bigger barns. And then when he dies, what happens? It gets divided, and then what? And we have to wrestle with that. And so we get into this attitude where we say, send it, don't spend it, right? How do I send it rather than spend it? Money goes where you tell it to go. We've said that this whole message. That's true. Sometimes your money is required to go places because you've chosen already to send it there. You have a mortgage, you have a car payment, you have credit card debt, or you already chose to spend the money before you had it, and now you're coming up to pay for it. But you already said yes to it once. Now you're sending it, right? Money goes where you tell it to go. Now here's the thing. Like a lot of times when it comes down to money and it comes down to giving, a large part of it gets to our motivation. A few weeks ago, I was thinking just deeply about this, how this series is going to conclude and how does it wrap up. And over and over and over, God kept just showing me in this kind of whisper, Cain and Abel, and Cain and Abel, and Cain and Abel. And I'm like, God, what are you doing with this? And I started thinking back to Cain and Abel. They had this moment in Genesis chapter 4 where these two brothers, they were the sons of Adam and Eve, and they brought offerings to the Lord. And one from Abel was considered an acceptable offering, and by Cain, God rejected it, even though they brought the offering at the same time. And then Cain got mad and actually kills his brother. And God and Cain reconcile this dynamic, and it was just, it's tragic when you watch this. And I think there's a tragic reality that God shows through that says so many of us live our lives, even when we think we're being generous, we are giving or being generous for a blessing, Cain, rather than being generous from a blessing, Abel. And we think if we just give something, then God is entitled to give us more back. Jesus says in Luke chapter 6, I believe verse 38, he says, give and it will come back to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over into your lap. For the measure by which you give is the measure by which you will receive. Most of us like the first part of the verse. Give and it will come back to me? Yes. That's better than 5% interest. 4.75 is the highest interest rate in American banking right now for standard savings accounts. Look it up. But Jesus is going, you give, I'm going to give it right back to you. 100% investment. Where else do you find those numbers? But then he says, the measure by which you give is the measure by which it will be given back to you. The motivation of our heart, aligning our lives with Jesus, orienting our lives under him, does a whole lot about that conversation. We don't like the second part of the verse. But we can't just take half of what Jesus says. We got to take the whole thing. And so he starts to pull this dynamic together. Where you send it speaks volumes about you. What are you giving it to? So as you think about your life, your legacy, what's next, I want you to think about two things. God tells us over and over that we give from a cheerful heart, a cheerful disposition. So when we give, let's give like two things that are going to bless others. We have to decide where to give or what to support, two things to choose from. I want to give you like some river marks, right? Some river boundaries, right? One of those is give from a grateful heart. Abel gave from blessing. And God blessed that. He blessed that worship. He blessed that. This is what was going to happen. Like, give from a grateful heart. What are you thankful for? The Bible tells us that we already have every spiritual blessing in Christ already given to us. What are we lacking? Someone say nothing. You lack nothing according to Scripture. A couple of dollars a month, maybe. But life is so much more. Right? So give from a grateful heart. And you may give that to church. You may give that to an organization that is important to you. You may give that to something that's really meaningful to your life, that you're thankful for. And then give from a broken heart. Give from a grateful heart, something that's blessing you. Be thankful for it. Share that back with them. And then give from a broken heart. What are the things that stir your soul the most? Is it foster kids? Is it illiteracy? Is it racial inequity? Is it people across the world who don't have Bibles or don't have churches? Is it battered women? Is it single dads who have no legal chance to have their kids because the court's against them? What is the thing that breaks your heart before God? Give there. And let those two riverbanks channel your generosity, a grateful heart and a broken heart. If you don't channel it now, you won't think about channeling it later. And in that space, rather than building bigger barns for yourself, create space for the legacy to continue beyond you. We will expire. But the impact of your life can go on if you send it now. Make the effort to organize that. Build the legacy forward. Because if you don't do it, someone else will tell your stuff where to go. And Jesus calls us to manage all the way through. Send it, don't spend it. Tell it where to go. Write the story you want told when you're gone. Don't wait for someone like me to write your story for you. You tell the story you want told and leave that legacy.